Hi, Tobias. Welcome now officially to my podcast after years of working on other podcasts together.
Yes.
Um, and today we really just want to talk about you. I think that's something that has been missing sort of in my portfolio. First of all, for me to know more about you, but also about like other people that sort of consume our content
Hmm.
to see what you're about. And I want to kind of jump in right with a very, very important for you, for us, for everybody question. I mean, what really is music journalism? Or we could start with the question, what is journalism?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
you are you are a journalist, like that's sort of like also how you would define
hmm,
yourself correctly. So
yeah.
yeah, what is it really? What is it?
Well, it's definitely changed. And I think it means different things to different people.
Hmm.
Um, I think also we talked about this in the AI podcast. The motivations for going into something can be very different from the results. So I think for me, writing about music was part of a self-discovery journey, like finding out about myself, which is very rarely the goal of most music journalists. But I think when it comes to the end result, I think it is about information foremost. I care more for information than opinion, and that to me is also a hallmark of journalism. I think opinion can drive journalism, but to me, music like journalism stands apart from other reporting through looking at facts, and those facts can be subjective. You can have subjective facts in a sense, but like angles on the topic, which in music, of course, is part of what makes it so fascinating. Yeah, but I think to me, journalism is a space where these subjective facts come together and where they can be observed and then evaluated by the reader or viewer in a way that enhances their insights. I think that's what journalism is to me. So I think yesterday I saw something on Facebook, which was one of these posts about AI, and then when you fact check, like then I'll enter it in Google and I'll have a look. Is this actually true? Then I do come back to the old magazines and newspapers because I think there's a journalistic angle, which means it's not driven by um, exterior, like it is driven by a desire to find out what is real and what isn't.
Interesting. And Soul, you said that it has changed a lot. What is the original medium for
Mm.
journalism?
Well, it's the medium is the newspaper. I would say that's where it comes from.
Hmm.
Also, the book biographies. So I would say the first music journalism as such, I mean, there was music journalism all the way back to the times of the Viennese classics. Maybe even earlier, there are reports of Bach's organ competitions where he played against other famous organists from his time. But those I don't think were journalistic. I think those were historical. Um, but where music journalism becomes something that is really important is the Viennese classic, and then the figure of Liszt, because he was like a real pop star and rock star. There were journalists actually following him around as he toured, and his performances were so above anything else that people had seen, and the music was so captivating that it actually brought people to follow him. And to me, that is, I think, where music journalism comes from, this desire to go deep and in this case, find out who this artist is.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if it makes any sense, but like journal or jour means day, right, in French.
mhm,
And so I really don't know where that terminology comes from, where that word comes from. But for me now, like putting that together is like that a journalist should be somebody who is in daily sort of like in daily contact with the information. And so journalism to me seems like, okay, it's not you write like an article today, it's published, and it's over. It's like something where you kind of dive into a subject matter and you stick with it. That's where like music journalism kind of is interesting, because like you're focusing on one particular medium, music, sound, however we want to
Yeah.
define that. And you have a constant um, engagement.
Yes.
Is that something that could be said in general for journalism, or is it more sort of like a project-based thing? Know what
No,
I
I
mean?
think it, yeah, no, I think that should be part of your goal and your ambition to be in touch with the topics you write about on a daily basis. Um, I think the difference between music journalism or journalism and science is that the form is more free. So the process is perhaps more open. So you can have a process and a result which is closer to the subject you're writing about. So music journalism can be very poetic, can be very literary, but it can also be scientific. I think 15 Questions is actually the magazine I edit is almost scientific in a way. It works with questionnaires. It doesn't. I mean, it does look at subjective impressions, but by collecting this, you arrive at a sort of a intersubjective objectivity, which is, I think, method used in psychology, in many sciences as well. So I think you're more free in that respect. But yes, I agree. I think a good journalist should be in touch with the developments driven by their own curiosity alone.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, the present then questions the past. Um, So, for example, my own views of journalism, I'm sure, have been questioned by a new generation of journalists or people working in fields adjacent to journalism. Um, so you have to question. So this, which you mentioned, is,
What are those fields that are adjacent in your opinion?
well, for example, let's have a look. Let's take our Mike Oldfield podcast. Do you think that's journalism? Just
I
from
mean,
your,
from my perspective, I don't think it is. From your perspective, it may be. Yeah.
yeah, or maybe that's actually true. Maybe I represent journalism and in that discussion. I would say it's adjacent. It's not journalism.
I see. Hmm. Hmm.
Although, I mean, as maybe you watch this as well, in Germany, there's a weekly, every Sunday, there's it used to be called, I think, Presseshoppen. Uh, so it was a meeting of 5 journalists from all across Europe. Usually one from Germany, and then they would have other journalists from France, from Spain, from England, sometimes from the States as well, and they would discuss contemporary politics.
Hmm.
Um, so that is part of the journalistic space, and I would argue that what we do in the Mike Oldfield podcast is part of it, but more adjacent in the sense. It's not the reporting; it's working with the facts and interpreting the facts. But that's an important part of journalism as well. Um, I mean, all of these, like if you have in the vinyl community, there's lots of channels of people presenting their vinyl collection and talking about their vinyl collection. Is that journalism? I don't think so. But it's very useful and informative. And if we look at the power of these podcasts to get people to listen to music, I think they're more effective than a lot of the traditional journals.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And so maybe let's stop talking about this for a moment and just talk about your path to becoming a journalist. I think
Yeah,
that is very interesting, and maybe even start like where were you born, and which kind of schools did you go to, and so on, and what did you study? I know you went to university, and
yeah,
how did you end up? I mean, I know some things because I first came across you, I think, in the late 90s.
yeah.
Um, um, I don't remember. Was it Tokafi already? Like, what that
Yeah, it
website?
was a different magazine, and I remember you. I was still living in Münster then, and you picked
Hmm.
me up, and we tried finding a parking spot, and I think we drove around town for an
Yeah,
hour.
but that was years after I had first heard of you.
Okay.
So anyway, so tell us about your history.
Yeah, well, my history into music is curious in the sense that my parents were really not interested in music. They weren't at all. And now my brother is a record producer, and well, I'm a copywriter as well, but music journalist is definitely a big part of what I do. I was born in the Netherlands, went to the Dutch kindergarten, then to German school in Rotterdam first, then The Hague. The German school in Rotterdam doesn't exist anymore. It was a really, really fantastic time. Super tiny classes. Um, so we had one class which was composed of one girl. There was another class which was a twin, like the twin brothers. And my class was the biggest, with I think 6 or 7 people. So that school doesn't exist anymore. As you can imagine, it's um, now gone for financial reasons. And then we moved to The Hague, and that's where I lived until I graduated. And I think I was into music um, for various reasons during school, but my real obsession with music started when I moved to Frankfurt, and I actually started studying economics.
Let
Which
me
I
ask
would.
you something about your school days. So you said you went to the German school in Rotterdam,
Yeah.
and then you went to some other school in Den Haag.
Yes,
And
not the German school, which is now the German International School.
okay, so that was also German school, and that meant that the lessons were in German, or what does that entail, really?
Yeah, they were all in German. Now, actually, today that might be different. They might have some courses in English as well, but at the time it was all German, and Dutch was a mandatory one of the mandatory foreign languages you would have to take.
Okay, so you were exposed to the Dutch language in everyday life,
Yeah,
and in school you were mostly taught in German. Interesting. And
yeah, it
obviously
was.
your parents are German, right? So you learned
Yeah,
German at home. Okay.
yeah. My parents weren't going to. The plan was never for them to stay in the Netherlands for that long. So my
Hmm.
father had different options, and so that's why I went to German school rather than a Dutch school, which I could have also done. Would have been like if they had known that they stay there for like 30 or 40 years, I think that would have panned out differently. But that way I went to the German school, and then I also went to study in Germany, which I probably in like lots of people in my class didn't. They stayed.
Hmm. And you said that your parents were not interested in music. What were they about, or what
Yeah,
are they about?
well, it would be wrong to say they weren't entirely disinterested in it. They did go to concerts occasionally, and they had a record collection. But I think that their interest in record collecting was more that of this being part of your culture. Like I think they felt a certain um, they felt it was sort of part of what had to be done if you were part of a certain group of people. So their record collections were all over the place. They would have a big box set of like 40 entirely dedicated to vinyl LPs of solo piano, romantic repertoire. Then there would be lots of James Last and German party hits. And I actually loved that stuff when I was young. So I really enjoyed the comeback when it came back through the downbeat and chill out era in the 90s. Had a natural affection to that. I think my parents they were very into discussing. They really loved exchanging their ideas. My father in particular. So I think that really bred my interest in journalism as well. This
Yeah.
exchange of opinions. So we would have every Saturday and Sunday we would meet over tea and cake. So my mother would bake a cake, and then we would sit down. We would talk about politics, and it would get really heated. But when once tea was over, that was it, and everybody was fine again. Um, and I think yeah. So and my father just loved being in nature. So there was a lot of walking and then also talking on these long walks, hikes. So most of their vacations would spend somewhere in Germany because the Netherlands are really like a very urban country.
Yeah.
Despite the beautiful beaches and the dams and there's lots of nice fields, but most of it's agricultural, so it's not for recreational purposes. So we would also always go to Germany, somewhere in the woods or in the mountains, and there was lots of talking. Yeah, there was lots of talking, and I was actually going to become a political journalist. That somehow, I don't know why that got lost and replaced by my interest in culture.
So that so you were already interested in journalism before you started going to university?
Yeah, definitely. I
Hmm.
didn't, but I thought, like, if you want to be a journalist, you don't study journalism, you study something else. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I studied economics, which, yeah, again, I wouldn't do today. I think that was a mistake. But on the upside, it really fed into my interest for music because it was so not interesting to me that I looked like I really dove headlong into music um, as a parallel um, sphere of passion. Like there was a real passion for it there. This was also the first time that I met people who liked the same kind of music that I did. I also explored different kinds of music through people who were obsessed with that, like folk rock, indie rock, which I had never been interested in before.
You know,
Um,
I can very clearly see that you are even more driven by the music as sort of like a catalyst than I actually thought. It's which is very cool and interesting. Obviously, that's where we tick the same way.
yeah.
Um, so, but explain to me, like, so you guys left the Netherlands and you moved. Your family moved to Germany, or did your
No,
parents stay and you went to Frankfurt to go to uni?
yeah. Just
Okay.
me. Yeah, just
Uh,
me. Actually, my brother stayed in the Netherlands for studies
mhm,
because The Hague has a great department for recording and sonology and everything.
mhm,
And then he moved to Beijing for a while. No, my parents stayed, and then only, well, it's not that recent, but like 15 years ago, I think they moved to Berlin.
mhm.
And then my brother came back to Germany as well, also stayed in Berlin, and I moved to Berlin at some point.
I see.
Yeah, but
So you went to Frankfurt and you were like 19 or something like that, or
yeah.
around that age. And okay, so explain, what did you sign up for and how was it?
So as I said, economics was my was what I was studying. It was horrible, I think, except for meeting some very like great people. When I think of Frankfurt at this time, I think of people and music. Um,
So it was horrible, but you met some great people.
well, this, economics is. I had been interested in economics, and I thought what was going to be part of the curriculum was going to understand how it works, but it was all statistics and mathematics.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious what today would be part of the curriculum. Um, it just was completely out. It was so different from my expectations, and I thought it was going to get better, but it didn't.
Hmm.
Which is probably on me. I mean, I could have just ended it after the like the first 3 or 4 semesters is sort of an introduction, and then you specialize. And I probably should have just ended it there, but I kept going, which I think is probably also part of my personality to keep going with things. So I've been with the print magazine Beat for a very long time. 15 Questions has been more than 10 years. So I stuck with that. But yeah, when I think of Frankfurt, really, I think of people and music.
So did you finish your studies there?
Yeah, yeah, I finished it, and
So how many years were you there for?
I think it was 4 and 4. No, it has to be 10, 5 years, I think. I
10
think it was
semesters.
10 semesters, I think.
Hmm. Very interesting. So you sat through it, let's say,
Yeah,
despite the fact that you knew it's not your passion or it wasn't really inspiring you. But I hope, I mean, working for Beat is different.
yeah. I mean, that again, I'm sort of an outlier in that it's a recording magazine with a very
Mhm,
technical angle, and
mhm,
I'm the cultural journalist.
mhm.
But no, it's very different. Yes, it's very, even though of course the economics of a magazine are very much about numbers.
Yeah, so but I like what I remember was your initiatives on the internet, basically, right? Like the first time I heard of you was you writing reviews on your own website.
Yeah.
And so your approach there was very much independent and sort like what I think is important about it, it's not the independence, is the fact that you work as a curator for yourself.
Mm.
Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, I think for that first magazine which you mentioned, that is very much true. So it was actually called Tokafi, which is just an abbreviation of my name. It's Tobias Carsten Fischer. And there were some people who called me that. So I thought, okay, whatever, I'm just going to use that. And it actually got me my job with the print magazine. So I would agree. It was sort of a business card. And I was curating my own taste. But I think during that time, I consciously uh, said to myself, I'm going to make this less about myself than it
Mhm,
used to be.
mhm,
Before I started that magazine, I'd already been writing online for quite some time. I started out writing um, death metal and industrial metal and sound art reviews for a magazine, and then I did
which which
classical.
which magazine was that?
Well, I hesitate to say the name. I have some issues with the name of this magazine.
Hmm.
I'll tell you privately, okay? It's
Okay.
easy to find me. If you really want to find it, it's easy to find.
Mhm,
I remember that lots of people. So I did really reviews of all different kinds and sorts, and it was very experimental. So some of that stuff is I don't think is very good anymore. But some of it was really good, and also the interviews I think were cool. And some people said I would never expected something this good after knowing the name of the magazine.
mhm,
Um, so it was
mhm.
very this was very underground.
Okay, okay, but that was the first thing you did, let's
Yeah,
say. Hmm.
the very first thing, and I only got in because I knew the webmaster, and they were desperately looking for people to write. They had no one.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I could actually lots of the people starting out in that time were just enthusiasts who couldn't write, and I think I'm not patting myself on the shoulder. I just think I could write. I could write a text without it needing like endless editing, and so that's
Hmm.
how I got in. Yeah,
Hmm. And let me ask about the writing part. So you said that was already something you were doing in school before going to uni. Um, do you remember any specific things in school where you realized that you have a knack for writing and that it's
yeah.
something that, yeah?
I knew this very like in first class in Rotterdam. We had to write short stories based on pictures. Vater und Sohn. I'm not quite sure if this exists in English. There's sort of a pictogram based way of telling stories between a father and his son, and we
Hmm.
were supposed to write the story based on these pictures. And I would be allowed to finish my story because I wrote so much longer than everyone else that I was allowed to take a separate room and finish my story, and it would take, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours for me to finish it just because I wanted to write.
Hmm.
And in The Hague, I edited together with a friend. Funnily enough, I actually am doing a podcast with him now because he also moved to Berlin about artificial intelligence. We edited the school magazine, which we print out on 2 sheets of paper and then copied and then pasted on the walls of school. So that was the first journalistic project.
Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot about that. That there are also school magazines that some people
Mhm.
do, and so yeah, so it was all pretty obvious from the very beginning, then, in a way.
Yeah.
And your practice, let's say, of writing just came as you were doing things. There was no, you were not sort of like sitting down, studying writing, right? Or was there ever a phase in your life where you sort of researched into the topic of writing itself?
No, I did actually. And I think maybe like if I had to give an advice, I would say if it's at all possible, do it that way. Is when I was in Frankfurt, I was experiencing music. I wasn't writing about it at all. In fact, I wasn't writing anything. I was on a 5-year sabbatical from writing, other than anything I had to do for university. I was just reading. I was reading about music and reading in a really bizarre way. Probably I bought the German version of Rolling Stone magazine, which is very different from the American one. I still think that the first few years of that magazine are the best that German music journalism has ever produced. Um, they did get some of the articles. They licensed some of the articles from the original one, but other than that, I had their exclusive original stuff, and it was amazing. But I would read. This was the years when there were every record store and every chain had its own free magazine on music, and I would get everything. And I would read it, and I would have like stacks of them. Um, and then when on lazy weekend days, I would pick them out and just read them. And I would read reviews. I read reviews endlessly for 5 years. And then after 5 years, I moved to Münster. And I think really in the first year, my friend said, "We're looking for someone who can write. Are you interested?" And I said, yes. And so I had 5 years of reading, and it was something I wanted to get out. And also in this time, I had built up a lot of animosity towards music journalism. So I read these reviews and I thought, this is not how a review should be written, or this is not the way I would write about the music. Actually, a
Hmm.
lot of stuff was fantastic, especially the reviews in the German Rolling Stone magazine. Some of those, I know a few of those by heart still today, just because I read them so often and I thought, this is so good. Um, Also, some of it was really bad. Like I mentioned in the last Mike Oldfield podcast, the review of Voyager that got me really angry. That was in German Rolling Stone magazine. It really angered me that someone would just, not the fact that it was a bad review, like a negative one, just the fact that it was so superficial and obviously written from a like a point of view of spite. It was just spiteful. It
Mm.
was it was uh,
Yeah.
it was just mean. And so I had a lot of energy that wanted to get out.
Let me tell you my impression about music journalism.
Yeah.
Um, I always felt what you just said about that one particular review. I sort of like felt that throughout, like there were only exceptions where it seemed that a review was trying to be fair or um, um, objective, if that's even possible, but it doesn't have to be objective, I know. But I remember reading a review of the first, or not the first, but the uh, Die Laus in the Comatorium, the Mars Volta record, was 2000,
Mhm.
I don't know, two, three, or something like that, right? In a magazine, and they were actually using words that were below the waistline, as we would say in German.
Yeah.
And it was really sort of, that was the moment where I stopped reading that kind of thing. So and so let me answer this question: has it become cool to be cruel in music journalism at some point?
Yeah, I think so. It was, I mean, there were so many reviews out there that cruelty was one way to distinguish yourself. I think. Um, especially I would say in German music journalism, it was something that came later. When I look at British music journalism, I think a certain harshness was always there. But it was I think the angle that many of the British ones had was more that it was entertainment. And I think when you then the same journalist would actually meet with the artist and do a longer piece, and then the review that would not really factor into it unless it was really, really cruel. So my impression was that reviews were seen sort of as entertainment and as easy consumption, and then the longer pieces were the
Hmm.
actual journalistic part. Whereas in Germany, you would already, like Rolling Stone magazine had long reviews. Partly, not all of them were long, but they would definitely have one or two really long reviews. So cruelty, yeah, I think that was it. I think cruelty it tells more about the person that's writing about than the music, like than the music itself.
Hmm.
If you're that cruel, the same, of course, goes for euphoric reviews. Like if you're very, very positive about something, it's rarely about the music. You're celebrating something in yourself that got touched by the music.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, and obviously, as a musician, I'm speaking also from a
Yeah.
place of, I mean, I'm going to use this word now, even though it's not the feeling, like from a place of jealousy. I'm just
Mm,
talking where a reviewer or like some
mm,
journalist can be more important or more popular than the things that he's actually writing or she's actually writing about.
yeah.
And that is, to this day, I find it horrible how somebody um, listening to your music online on a reaction channel
Yeah.
makes the money that you never made.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
and I think that's just something that in journalism, kind of journalism is kind of like based on that, because as a journalist, if you're thinking about, yeah, I mean, a journalist in the arts, then obviously it is like you recycle other people's work by
Yeah.
repackaging it. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I'm just descriptively
Mm,
also, like you're kind of like repackaging things that other people have creatively created. You create another piece of work which can be creative or artful or not, obviously. And then because it's a mass medium that I mean, in some cases
mm.
when you're working for a big newspaper, for example, then your opinion starts counting just because a lot of people have access to it.
Yeah.
Um, and that generally is sort of like a, a perspective or like a power that musicians, if we talk about music journalists,
Yeah.
musicians had to fight for. Where as a journalist, if you have the platform, um, I mean, I know that, I mean, it's only like a very, very few people that actually write for big publications, obviously. I mean, I'm not trying to make a point here. It's just sort of like an observation.
Yeah. The way I explain that would explain that is at least maybe that's a positive way of explaining it is that many journalists, I think, are people who grow up really interested in arts and music particularly, and have a very strange taste, a very unusual taste. I always had a very unusual taste. Um, and even if even in the group, like even if you take a niche and then you would say that's something I like, even within that niche, I would have a very unusual taste. So I would like the albums that the other people in that niche would not like. And because I grew up, there's this idiom that you grow up on the music collection of what's in your father's tape recorder.
Hmm.
And that was true for me. So I listened to a lot of pop music as well, and I really love pop music. But I was drawn to really dark stuff. So that there was a there was a problem in this tension between those likes. And I think when you grow up, people ridicule you for your taste, and then you develop defense mechanisms, and you look for arguments why why you like these things so much and why they're actually worth as much as the other things. And then you overcompensate, I think, and you overcompensate and once you get the chance to write for a big magazine, then you make use of that position to go higher and in your argument and actually claim that it's true the other way around, and that actually your taste is better than and the other one, that the other people were wrong. I think it's an overcompensating mechanism. There was part of what I loved about the German Rolling Stone magazine is that this was a magazine really rooted in rock culture. But these people were super honest. So if they liked something that was commercial, they would actually they would say, "This is not a guilty pleasure. We really like this." They loved the first Sugar Babes album and wrote a glowing review of that. They loved the first All Saints album, very commercial pop band of the 90s, and wrote like I think it was a 5 or 4.5 out of 5-star review. And one of the best reviews I read was by I think he used to be the editor-in-chief, then Arne Willander, and he wrote about ABBA. And I think it was the box set which collected all of their albums, and it closed with him saying, "I remember sitting in my father's car while we were driving, I don't know, close by this city, and on the radio they were announcing that ABBA had disbanded. What other thing that was so long ago would you still consciously remember today?" That's the end of that review. And I thought, wow.
I remember when ABBA disbanded. I also remember when Elvis Presley died.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the question that is kind of like very interesting to me is like, do you see any are there any ethical issues in the relationship of artist, let's say, and journalist or reviewer, like in this case? Is it how can like is it ethical for music journalists to actually be friends with musicians, for example? And how can musicians contact music journalists?
Yeah.
Or
So
should they even, you know?
oh, they definitely should. Yeah. I think the more direct, the better. I don't think it's unethical for them to be friends at all. If it is unethical, then I would say the thing that is unethical about it is simply, or is problematic, is simply that you're more likely to write about your friends than about a complete unknown, even though that could work the other way around as well.
I was just going to say that that's what I experienced, that people are not writing about my stuff anymore.
Yeah. So I guess it goes both ways.
Hmm.
There was in Germany, we had a debate about precisely this topic. There was a debate where the German music journalism had become too soft because Germany as a country is still too small, and everyone knows everyone. And then journalists become like they become pals with the musicians, and they're afraid to write something critical of them. I would say that from the music that I'm interested in, that's not an issue. And also my impression is not that musicians really want to be friends with journalists. I don't really see that. Could have been different when journalists had more power, because I think now the power balance that you spoke about has actually reversed. And I think the power is now with the artists, not with the journalists. Generally speaking, sure, there are exceptions, but I don't think that a review on Pitchfork, not even best new music on Pitchfork, means anything. And that's the only music magazine that has like any sizable audience that means
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to be friends, that is, of course, that's a bigger step. I mean, is it okay for them to have a nice, cordial relationship? Sure. And if only for the fact that I believe that for the things that music journalism should be talking about, you're going to get better replies and better insights if someone opens up to you and you don't open up to someone you dislike or feel is a bad person. There have been so many cases now, documented cases, where journalists have abused the willingness of artists to open themselves up, because I mean, that's part of being an artist, is a certain willingness to open yourself up where others would be afraid, or to go beyond your own fear of opening up. And then for that to be abused and maybe even like off the cuff remarks or stuff that was never supposed to be printed to go into print, I can understand why people would, like artists, would be skeptical. And I think building a relationship where there's that trust is important. So, for example, if an artist asked me to remove something from an interview they did, I'll remove it. Not out of just because they're my friends, but just because I want them to be comfortable with what's out there about them. But generally speaking,
this is a good. So in a situation like that, where somebody asks you to remove something, how do you remember any instances where you were just really like, where you had a big question mark above your head that was saying like, why does this, why does this have to go? Or is it always logical? Or do you always understand why something may not be for the public? Or
yeah, there's definitely a generational shift, I think, in how artists want the for example, an interview to look like, and that is shaped by the dominance of the podcast. Or podcasts are now much more important than the written word in many respects, and I think that has influenced how artists want their interviews to look like. So probably the most important book I ever read in terms of my perspective on music journalism is called Draußen scheint die Sonne, which translates roughly to It's Sunny Outside. And it's a book of interviews by a reporter of well-known Munich-based German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung with various celebrities, among them many musicians. And that his interview with Lemmy of Motorhead is probably still my favorite interview ever. And there's an interview with Jean-Michel Jarre in there, which is also very nice. But these interviews were very clearly highly edited. They're to a very high degree. They're extremely artful. They're very funny. They very rarely delve into the actual topic. And so actors will rarely talk about acting. Musicians rarely talk about music. They talk about topics which interest that person in that moment. So he claims that he doesn't have any preparation before he goes into the conversation, which would be the exact opposite of what I would do. And actually, my preparation was even deeper in the past than it is now. Now I'm much freer than I used to be. And sometimes he would ask them, "What do you want to talk about?" Or he would tell them, I have two interviews prepared. One of them is about this, the other one is about that. Which one would you like me to use? Stuff like that. I think that was really interesting. But I came into journalism with that mindset that whatever is discussed is open for editing. And that has changed. So I edited a few where I was really proud of my editing. And I thought, this is really cool. This reads just like a conversation. And then the artists were actually, they felt hurt because I had messed up the order, and I had taken stuff and rearranged and put it somewhere else. And they felt misrepresented. So that was a learning process. So yes, there was a big question mark. And at first I felt disappointed, but I have learned to accept that point of view. And now to even, in a way, I believe that maybe especially for 15 questions, where there's a format you have, which is rather rigid, and within that format, freedom can exist. Maybe that's fine. And maybe it's okay if the final results don't have the fluency of a perfect conversation. And maybe that's okay. So yes, that has changed. Otherwise, there were one or two interviews where people asked me to remove them entirely, and I thought, I don't quite. Why would you want to remove it?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah,
But I don't.
that's
Yeah,
yeah, I have experienced something like that on a different level where it's about, say, which photo to use, like,
Yeah,
or um, but where it's sort of about appearances, visual appearances rather than um, words. Yeah, yeah. But I see like the world has become a it's interesting, a little bit more literal in a way,
yeah,
in terms of how people are presenting themselves. As you say, there are these formats where people are talking live with each other, and that is
yeah,
captured. And then the question is like, do I edit or do I not edit?
yeah.
And then like to also decide who is the editor.
Hmm.
Like, would I be editing this interview, or would you be editing this interview, right?
Yes,
Or
yeah,
this conversation. And I think that's very interesting because that's where we can see that the role or the responsibility about the journalistic aspect of capturing data or information, let's say,
yeah.
is not really that clear anymore these days.
No,
Not the way it used to be.
no,
Yeah.
and I don't think in some formats it never has been. If you take the documentary, for example, documentaries are extremely expensive. Um,
You mean like
and yes,
film
video,
documentary?
film,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Extremely expensive. They sometimes take years to assemble. Um, at least they used to. And so, for example, if you have a making of a movie for a bonus as a bonus feature for a DVD, if the movie company finances that, how many critical voices are you going to hear in that documentary? I remember the listening to the director's comments for Alien versus Predator. And if you listen to that, it sounds like this is the best movie, like the most artfully made movie and most thought through movie ever made, which clearly, if you've watched it, is not the case. Um, uh, it's a complete mess. So I think it takes. The funny thing is, I think actually, if you do allow for dissenting opinions, you usually end up with something that more people will want to watch. So the best example is the documentaries made for the Alien series, um, sticking close to that,
Mm-hmm.
which allow everyone to voice their opinion. There was a lot of critical stuff in there, like really super critical stuff behind the scenes, a lot of revelations, and they put that on the bonus within like in the bonus material. But I think people actually talk about that. I watched those documentaries more than the movies probably, and I know a lot of people love those as well. I think
Mm-hmm.
because there's a need for this kind of questioning, and it doesn't actually question it because I think for me at least, I'm not always interested in stuff that I like. I'm just as much interested in stuff that I dislike or stuff that I dislike within stuff that I do like. Like the discography of Mike Oldfield, there's stuff in there I just like the albums I don't like, and then we'll talk about Tubular Bells 3 next time. And there are more like there are parts of that where I think this I don't understand it, or I think he made the wrong decision maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I mean, I think that's part of what makes it interesting.
And that's also what I guess makes you a journalist, right?
Yeah,
That it's sort of like you're looking at the process. You rather than having to satisfy your own need for liking or feeling like a part of something, you're interested in the process, in the making of, let's say, in the behind the scenes, in the documentary that has not been made, let's say, and you're trying to like uncover some of those aspects that are not visible.
when I started writing reviews for Tokafi, I wanted to review everything that interested me, even if I disliked it, because why would I dislike it? I'm
Hmm.
so I think there are nowadays there are more and more people who will say that if I don't like something, that's on me, not necessarily the artist.
Hmm.
Um, that's true, but it doesn't end there for me. I want to know, why do I dislike it, and why do I want to listen to something at the particular moment and not want to listen to it at another moment? And why does something grab me now, like Voyager did by the one the like altered album we did last time? It really grabbed me this time, and it didn't. I mean, it liked it at the time when it was released, but not in that way. So that's curious, and why does something which so many like millions of people love, like Taylor Swift, also raise so many cause so many people to say this is nothing special. This is it's bad. I think it just interests me why, rather than having everyone voice their displeasure. It's interesting to me to hear why someone dislikes it, and if you go deeper, quite often you'll get something that's interesting and relevant for yourself.
Yeah, that's very cool because like if we look at like the Taylor Swift example, within that conglomerate, let's say, that makes that name,
Yeah,
there are artful people in there. Maybe it's not the music, maybe it's the marketing or like
yeah,
some sort of some aspect of it is, and I mean like
sure,
obviously I'm speaking just from my perspective. That's where my interest would be. Like,
yeah,
what is the skill that everybody sees here? Where does it actually come from? And I wanted to like go back to something you said like a long time ago, like 48 minutes ago. You were talking about journalism versus science.
yeah,
And this is kind of like where I see quite a similarity. So you're kind of like asking the same question that a scientist would ask, but you're using a different method. It's like it's a different, it's more of a social I don't know, social sciences sort
yeah,
of approach rather than technical sciences approach.
yeah. I think I would say that to me, I could say that music has sort of a functional aspect to it, and that it's sort of a self-medication aspect to it. It does for me, and I'm pretty sure it does for many other people. But maybe we could, like if we take that one step further, then I think music is a medium through which our personalities or the output of the outer world is broken through music in us, and we can use our feeling about music to understand ourselves as persons better, maybe also the world. If we compare different reactions to the same piece of music, then it says something about us as people. Um, and I think rather than using music as a source of um, disagreement, we can use it as a safe space to understand someone else's response, because we have the music. The music is there, and we can have, if someone explains why they dislike it so violently, then then that this discourse, like the animosity, can stay within the music or in the space of discussion around the music, rather than having to go directly to us. Um, so I think that's how I see it.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, yes and no. I think um, I think you have kind of like pointed out something, and that reminded me of the aspect that it's very difficult to really understand where the motivation, like we're talking about the Tyler Swift thing, where like we don't
Yeah,
know where the skill actually sits. And I think also on the other side, we don't know where the motivation to like something or to be interested in something
yeah,
actually is located. So
yeah,
in your case, I think because you always come back to the music, even when I talk about the journalism, you mention the music first. So for
mm,
you, that is kind of like the first
yeah,
thing, right? Right. But for somebody else, it may be something else. Like somebody may be reading music reviews or may admire certain
yeah.
reviewers for the style of how they write. So it's not for them, even though those people write about music, they are not interested in the music. They are interested in the writing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's the same with music. There are some people that are into music because they like collecting,
Yes,
for example.
Yeah.
Or people are into music not because they like the music, is because they like the sound.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of like different levels where we can see the intrinsic motivation of the individual lies, and maybe completely different from and I also think that's why we have people that talk about music, or people that make music, people that talk about music, and then we have people that like to consume people talking about music, or the like you
Yeah.
see it's like a really nested and complex system that kind of like appears if you look closely.
Yeah. It probably, it's very rarely about the music, or maybe that's would be an interesting topic for me to really think about, is how could it ever be about the music? What, I mean, what is the music? What is that? My impression is that for many people, it's the feeling that goes with the music, the community that goes with the music. With the documentary I saw recently, which was sponsored ultimately by Panasonic, and they sent a DJ around the world to interview artists and scientists about what music does to the brain, and but and they so there was a neurochemical and neuroscience aspect to it. But the musicians you spoke to all said it's about community. Music brings people together. So it's all about community. So for me, it was never about community. I never had a community about music. As I
Mhm.
said, I had an unusual taste, and my preferred method of listening to music was alone in my room, um, without any distractions. So that it was really a big step for me to go start going to concerts. I didn't go to Mike Oldfield when he was in The Hague. I My first gig I think I ever went to was Killing Joke in Frankfurt. Probably, I don't know, it was 97 or somewhere around that time. It was really, really late. And clubbing is also, that's also in a way an anonymous community that you're building every night. Um, so it was, I don't know, I guess it's a very different way of approaching music. But yes, I think it means very different things to many different people. So the first question I ask in 15 questions is, what happens in your body when you listen to music? So it took me a while to figure out that what I was experiencing was not at all what other people experience. So I have synesthetic experience,
Mhm.
but not so much colors, but shapes and forms moving. Sometimes it can also be notes. I can see the notes. That's very helpful if you're looking for like transformation of themes in a classical piece. Then I will actually see the themes in a way. But apparently, that's not what most people experience. More people experience it than I would have expected. Um, but I actually, and I have these synesthetic experience in all of my art experiences. So I see things when I listen to music. I have feel emotions when I watch movies, and I think I have sort of a hearing, and I read in rhythms. So there's a more of a when I'm reading, there's more of a musical component to it. So, but that's sort of, I think it starts there. That
Mhm.
our experience of music is so vastly diverse that it seems that it's hard, for example, to rate it properly. To what, if you rate it as in the traditional review, what based on what exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I just as you were talking, I was kind of like trying to organize my thoughts also, and a word that came up for me is projection, really. In a way, what you describe is that each individual person has sort of like a particular way of projecting onto something and also into themselves. And
Yeah,
and that includes everything that you just mentioned. That includes the dreams, that includes like the needs, where you say like there's sort of like maybe some people have a need for community, or you know, um, or sometimes maybe it's even just about feeding that dream. So like reading about music, I can imagine is something that may, or reading music magazines about like, not music magazines, musical instrument magazines, gear reviews and stuff like that.
Yes.
That's kind of like a very good example where that projection
Mhm.
is at play very strongly. You know,
As an
it's
artist,
fascinating.
I would be can this part of the debate which sort of goes around the topic is this question, as an artist, is it a greater compliment to you if someone writes something positive about your music who is deeply knowledgeable about the kind of music that you've made, or
Hmm.
by someone who is comes from a deeply like somewhere completely different, like someone who would usually listen to Taylor Swift, and that person says, "Wow, Markus Reuter's last Kid Arrow album of 1 hour long ambient track, that's amazing." Which of these two would be more of a reward for you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I'm aware and clever enough to understand that those are two very, very, very
Yeah,
different things that I can't even compare.
yeah,
So I would appreciate both just as much, I guess. Um, yeah.
and
So
and
I think it's incomparable. It's not a good question.
no, it is. I agree. It is incomparable, and
Yeah.
I think the problem really only arises if that's reverse, and if you get criticism. Like if you get criticism from someone who knows your music and tells you, okay, this is not a really good album, or someone we would usually listen to pop music telling you the same. I think this. I come to this because we're in the middle of a debate about the role of music journalism. Um, and what it means to be journalistic. And there was, for example, a critic who said something um, negative about Chapel Roan, who was a lesbian pop artist. And the criticism was, well, he's not a lesbian, so it's not his place to be talking about this music. So there's a clear that music has a has a target audience, and if you're not part of the target audience, are you even allowed to talk about it? Um,
I
my view,
I
you
think
know,
if you're only if you're only talking about the music, yes, you're allowed to talk about it. But yeah, if you need to understand or look at the full package, and you're not part of that lifestyle or that world, let's say, like it's true. I mean,
yeah,
but still, it should be allowed to obviously critique the music. But then and then that's what I'm saying. Like, but the projection lies elsewhere. So
yeah,
it's not about the music for most people that. But then that would also be an assumption which is wrong. And like the example that I think even made on my podcast a few times is like when people started like goth rock bands in the 80s,
yeah,
like maybe the motivation had nothing to do with music.
yeah,
Yeah, just like a fashion thing. Like they wanted to look cool, or and then I think I said that to you. Then they write a song which becomes a hit, and it
yeah,
actually starts representing something that's real for the people that listen to it. So that's how also projections can become real and
mhm,
become important, and they like a whole scene or a whole musical style or a whole art scene can build or can be uh can start from coming from something like that. So that's also why when I'm talking about projections or dreams or unfulfilled needs or even fulfilled needs, it's it's not a criticism.
yeah,
It everything anything can be a seed. That's how I see it.
yeah. I agree. I think for me personally, I would say that in terms of what you're allowed to write about, anything goes. Because the journalists are part of the audience, and the audience all is part of the creation process of the music. Once it's out there, it changes, broken through all the listening experiences, and then something happens. But as a journalist, you also have to be able to deal with the criticism that you then reap. Like if you say something very critical and you're not part of the original target demographic, then it's going to hurt some people, and you'll have to live with that. I don't think there's a problem in that per se, as long as it's a civil discussion. But for example, I'm a big artists tend to not like this thinking in drawers, this compartmentalization. So the entire idea of genre, for example, is something which artists, I believe, strongly dislike. But I think genres are fantastic. I think genres were part of why music was so great in the 90s, because you would have everything would start out in one new thing, and then it would split into these other genres, sometimes just by the idea of a word, like ambient industrial or metal dub. So you had someone with the word would be there first, and then he would make the music.
Yeah.
But the genre, like grunge, probably like in the beginning, you would have maybe 20, 30 grunge bands, and they would all be different. They would not sound alike at all. So but genre allowed people to discover new music through liking one part of that. So I think genre was really useful
So
for the listeners.
genre should be part of the sort of the credits in a way, like so
Yeah,
you can make associations by the producer or by the musicians, by the artist, or by genre, obviously. Yes.
yeah, yes. And I think one of the problems we have today is that genres have disappeared. I think there should be more genres again,
No.
real genres.
I have an anecdote for you here, which is yeah, with a music journalist. So about 30 years ago, I played with an ensemble in Detmold, Germany. I think it was in Detmold, and it was like the the concert series. It was in the summer. I think was called Classic Night or something like that, like in English, and it's like wrong. What they meant was classical. Talking about classical music,
Yeah,
and they called it something like class. So that was like the first thing that was kind of a little bit fucked up. But anyway, like, and we played and it was a good concert, and I spoke with the journalist after the show, and he wrote a review, which was like a horrendous review, where he was also um, kind of criticizing something that I said to him in the
mm,
conversation. Um, but all of this was based on the misunderstanding that he thought it was classical music because the town presented this classic night, and he was thinking that it means classic, like the German word classic,
yeah,
and I found that to be like extremely, like, I remember how stunned I was about this. Like, how can a journalist not be clever enough to understand that there is sort of like a
yeah,
so anyway, like I just thought this was one of them in my first
mm,
experiences with live reviews, with
yeah.
reviews of live shows, and it was hilarious looking
And
back.
of course, if it's in print, you can't go back and like correct it, which is a real problem sometimes.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm pretty well. I may still have a photocopy of it somewhere, but also, like there's nothing. What's that sentence? There's nothing that's older than the newspaper from yesterday, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mostly it is, yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, those experiences are precisely the problem, I think. I think there were so many of those. As you said, the cruelty had become a thing. Um, even if it wasn't cruel necessarily, I think there was um, reviewers and critics. I mean, the word critic in itself was misunderstood as meaning being critical.
yes, yes.
I think that's why we now have had a long time where that's been completely reversed, where many magazines discarded the numerical scores numerical ratings, went far less critical. I think that's a sort of the swinging back of the pendulum, and rightly so in many respects.
What do you think of the word skepticism in this context? Or the concept of skepticism rather than criticalness, let's say, or being critical? Because
I think
that's something that I feel I come across like I don't think it's the same thing.
no, I'm not quite sure if what would interest me in a review would not be skepticism either. I think so. Either a review is very, very brief and gives you an opinion, which I think should not be skeptical, but should just be honest. Or it should go beyond that and go into a different field, like offer something different. Which could also be just a verbal description of the. I actually like reading verbal descriptions of music. If it's done well, it can really raise my curiosity. I think the critic should have the same listening approach as a regular listener, I think. Yes, they bring in more experience, and they should maybe bring in a wider field of possibilities where to listen, what to listen for, and where to take their experience with it. Maybe they make connections with what you call the projectional field, right? Maybe they can project into areas where other people wouldn't. That would be really interesting. Like they could make a connection with other art forms, or maybe with politics in a way that you wouldn't have expected it. But I don't want my reviewer to be skeptical, because that creates distance, and I want them to be close to the music. I think I would say that the print journalism and traditional journalism, there was always this distance. Print meant it could not be removed. You could only correct it with a like the newspaper could print a correction, which no one would read. It was set in stone. So the Wire, for example, when I was doing a label, we sent in the review. We sent in the CD, and we actually got a review, and my name was printed as Tobias Schmidt. So that was a bit unfortunate. So I did get a review, but my name was completely changed. No, but I want them to be. I think a reviewer should be close to the subject. They should be honest and maybe find interesting connections. That's what I'm interested in. Of course, my interest doesn't have to be the interest of everyone, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I think this whole opinion and skepticism leads to anything that would interest me personally.
You know, I'm starting to call you Schmidt from now on,
And
as your
that's fine
first
with me.
as your first name.
Yes, of course.
Schmidt Fischer.
Sounds good to me. I actually I knew a Tobias Schmidt, so that was doubly confusing.
Hey, so let's wrap it up with a couple of questions about the future of the written word, or like even the quantity, like the quantity of the written word that's out there, and also the quantity of music out there. What do you see happening? How do you see the future? What do you think is going to change, if anything is going to change?
I think, and maybe you're discovering this as well, is that the more the video sphere, YouTube and the podcast sphere grow, the more it becomes apparent how incredibly powerful and useful the written word is. There's no other way for humans to express ideas so condensed and precise as the written word, I think. So I feel that there is a future for the written word because it is useful, if only. It is also beautiful. I think it is so beautiful. It is far more beautiful than most real conversations. I'm saying that as someone who loves the written word, of course, but I think there's a beauty to it. Also, to maybe edited interviews will come back. I've seen a few evidences of that. I would appreciate it. As a whole, I think it seems more likely that that we'll get more video. That video will remain dominant, maybe become even more dominant. I think the audio podcast format, that might go down. I could imagine. I may be wrong, but I think it is definitely, like, most of them have grown too long and too. I think it's sometimes tedious to listen to that. I think it would be useful to be able to, for them to edit it out into smaller portions. I think the music journalism is one of the few areas where I think that would be ripe for more content. I think there's not enough content. If you look at electronic music, I am not aware of any maybe a handful of electronic music publications. They've all but disappeared entirely. And I would wish for there to be more, like good in-depth interviews, reportage, more documentaries, more reviews, more of that, to give you more of that feeling that there's a community and something happening around that music.
But really, as everything is getting like more in terms of the content, the music as well,
Yeah.
and things get more diversified, and I mean, that's questionable, but you know what I mean. Like there's less and less money to be made, not as in a commercial effort, but as something self-sustainable,
Yeah.
right? I think what you're asking is probably going to be only going to happen within a circle where there are people that do it for the love of things rather than so it's like a hobby.
Yeah. I mean,
So like when can you imagine like a reportage about Bernhard Wüstenheinrich?
yes.
Like would be amazing. But who would want to do that? Who would do that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's one thing we haven't talked about at all, is the financial reality. And the financial reality is that there is essentially already at this moment, you can basically not make any money with music journalism, which is a serious issue. Like something like 15 questions, which requires a lot of time to maintain. That is a problem. Yes, that's something that would be a separate podcast topic. But I think it's the same for musicians. Like, yes, I agree. It would have to be done by people doing it for the love of it, and then maybe that love takes them somewhere where there is a reward for that, also in financial terms. My impression is that that's not the way it's going to go. My impression is more that art, for many people, art is going to be something and writing about art is something done on the side, financed by income generated through a day job, a well-paying day job.
Yeah. The way it really kind of has always been before music and like music became copyable and became a commodity in that sense. Yeah.
People make fun of Mozart's letters asking for money, but that was his reality. There was no Patreon for Mozart, so he had to write these letters.
Yeah, by the way, I have to write a letter like that. No. Okay, great. I think this was extremely insightful. Thank you for this. And we're gonna talk about your barista career in another episode.
Happy to talk about it always. And we'll see each other on a non-journalistic date this Sunday for another episode of the podcast.
Yes. Thank you, Tobias.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, bye for now.